All right, let's look at multiplying and dividing sig figs. It is a totally different rule than adding and subtracting. You have to switch gears in your head as to what you're doing. So let's look at an example that was in your packet, your notes. Okay, so the first thing, like I have done with adding and subtracting, you still want to put them in your calculator and see what you get. So for this, I get 6.9717, blah, 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 blah. We're not going to write all those numbers out. Again, this is the whole point of sig fig rules, is that we figure out how many numbers we write out in our final answer. All right, so here's what you do for multiplying and dividing. You round your answer to the least number of sig figs. So it has nothing to do with decimal places. So let me show you what I mean. When you look at this number, hopefully you can easily see it has 4 sig figs. When you look at this number, hopefully you can see very easily it has 5 sig figs. And when you look at this number, this 0 is to the left, so it doesn't count, so it has 2 sig figs. So the whole point is, there's no way you can write an answer out to 4 or 5 sig figs if one of the measuring devices is only limited to 2 sig figs. It means you can only go to 2 sig figs for your final answer. So 2 sig figs would be 1, 2. Now, because the next number is a 7, we're going to have to round that 9 up. So it's going to become 7, right? But again, that's only 1 sig fig, right? I need 2 sig figs, so we're going to bump that up and make it 7.0. That is 2 sig figs, and that is the right answer. Let's try some more. Okay, so let's do the first one. Plug it in your calculator. I get 2.88144. Okay, now, if you look at this number, 3.48, I see 3 sig figs. 6.9, that's 2 sig figs. Now, this one, this 0 here, does that count? Yes, it does. It's on the right, and there's a decimal point. So that is 3 sig figs. But because this is only 2 sig figs, we're only going to round our answer to 2 sig figs, which would be 1, 2. Again, because the next number is an 8, I'm going to round that up to a 9, and there's your final answer. All right, same thing goes for division. So, first divide. So I get 3.002746, da 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 da. All right, 0.984. Hopefully you agree with me that that is 3 sig figs. This number here, hopefully you agree that is 4 sig figs. So because this is 3 sig figs, we can only go to 3 sig figs. So that would be 1, 2, 3. So I'm literally going to chop off the rest. The next number was a 2. And so 3.00 is the final answer. Okay, scientific notation. Now, for multiplying and dividing, do not take it out of scientific notation. So hopefully you're following how I've shown you to plug in your calculator. And you're going to, this one's multiplying, sorry. Still the same idea. You're still just going to multiply these in your calculator. And you should get 4.6182 times 10 to the 9th. I just want to double check that. Yes, 10 to the 9th. Okay. Now here is the thing with scientific notation for multiplying and dividing. Didn't I tell you that you could just cross this out and ignore it? So if you look at this number here, this is 3 sig figs, right? because that 0 is to the right and there's a decimal point. So that 0 counts, and that's 3. This number here is 4 sig figs. But because this is only 3, we're only going to go to 3. So 1, 2, 3. So because the next number is an 8, we're going to round it up. We write 4.62 times 10 to the 9th. Done. Okay? So scientific notation for multiplying and dividing, do not take it out of scientific notation. Plug it in, count sig figs, because it's so easy with scientific notation, and you're done. All right, mixed functions. I like these problems because this is ultimately what could happen. Hopefully, you know from math class that if you have parentheses, that is what you do first. So I'm first going to do what's in this parenthesis and get that rounded answer. Then I'm going to do this one, get that rounded answer, and then I'll divide. Because remember, adding and subtracting have totally different rules from division. So, first thing, 3.45 plus 9.1 is 12.55. Now, is that the right number of decimal places? The answer is no. Because 9.1 only goes out to one decimal place, we're going to make this 12.6 because it goes out to one decimal place. On the other one, 14.84 minus 2.565, I get 12.275. Is that the right number of decimal places? The answer is no. Because this number only goes out to 2 decimal places, we're going to chop this down to 2 decimal places and make it 12.28. But we're not done. You're going to divide those two numbers. So 12.6 divided by 12.28, I get 1.02605, blah, 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 blah. Now, how many do I chop it down to? Well, 12.6 is 3 sig figs, right? And 12.28 is 4 sig figs. So because this is 3, we're going to go 1, 2, 3. Because this is a 6, we're going to round this up and make it 1.03. There's the final answer. So it's a lot of scribbling on this page, but hopefully this makes sense because it's very simple. You're just counting decimal places. But if there are parentheses, you have to go in order. Do what's in parentheses first, follow that math function rounding rule, and then go from there. So this one, hopefully, is actually pretty easy because, again, for scientific notation, you're just going to plug it in. So I'm going to do 9.23 times 10 to the negative third times 7.0 times 10 to the fifth. And I get 6,461. Okay. Counting sig figs. This number has 3 sig figs. I'm going to ignore the scientific notation. But this number has 2 sig figs, right? That 0 is significant. So 1, 2 means I'm going to round this up to 6,500. And as long as I don't put a decimal there, those zeros do not count. All right. Finally, I have 2 more. I want you to take a second and try these before I give out the answer. All right, on the first one, hopefully you got 0.024208, something like that in your calculator. Following sig figs, this has 3 sig figs, but this one, because these are all to the left, they do not count, and it only has 2 sig figs. So I'm going to round my answer to 2 sig figs. So again, these zeros do not count. So 1, 2 would be right here under this 4. And because the next number is a 2, we're just going to chop them off. We don't have to round up. So it is very simply 2.024 for that one. Hopefully that one makes sense. In the next one, I have a scientific notation number, division, and multiplication. But again, division and multiplication all follow the same rule. So I just plugged it in. And when I plugged it in, I get 2.8813 blah, 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 blah times 10 to the negative fifth. Now, following the rules, this number, if I ignore that, has 3 sig figs. This number also has 3 sig figs. But this number here only has 2 sig figs. The 0 to the right counts, but the 0 to the left does not. This means I need to chop my answer down to 2 sig figs, which would be 1, 2. Because there's an 8 behind it, I'm going to round it up and make it a 9. And now that is my final answer. So again, for multiplying and dividing, you are just going to count decimal places, go to the least amount of decimal places, and then for scientific notation, you just leave it in scientific notation and count decimal place, or sig figs. I keep saying, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. For multiplying and dividing, you count sig figs, go to the least number of sig figs, keep scientific notation the way it is, and count sig figs that way. It is so much easier. I hope that helped.